All right, let's dive into this one. Mitch Albom's The Five People You Meet in Heaven. It's a story that makes you think about, well, you know, life and loss and those connections that really stay with us. But don't worry, we're not going down any spooky ghost hunting paths here.
No ghost stories today. It's more about how our actions can have these crazy ripple effects and the things we learn along the way. What Album does really well is he uses the idea of heaven, the afterlife, as this way to explore these really human, down-to-earth themes.
Yeah, totally. Like,
Yeah.
we follow Eddie. He's this amusement park worker who just died. And now he's meeting these five people who, like, really impacted his life, even if he didn't always realize it at the time.
Right, right. And the first person he bumps into is this guy called the Blue Man.
Oh, yeah, the Blue Man.
Eddie kind of remembers him from Ruby Pier, the amusement park where he worked.
But then, bam. He finds out he actually played a part in the Blue Man's death when he was just a kid.
Whoa, talk about a heavy start. But it sets up this big idea. Our actions, even the ones that seem small, can have these huge, huge unintended consequences. The Blue Man, he says it straight up. Everything happens for a reason. Makes you wonder about how everything's connected, right? And if there's some bigger plan we're all part of.
It's a lot to take in, especially when you just, died.
Yeah.
But let's move on to encounter number 2. Eddie meets his captain from World War II. And it's not exactly a happy reunion. Eddie finds out that this nagging knee pain he's had forever, well, it's because the captain shot him during the war.
Ouch.
No.
Talk about a plot twist. But as you keep reading, you realize the captain did it to save Eddie's life. He had to stop him from running into this burning hut. It was a crazy act of sacrifice.
Seriously. And it makes you wonder, do we ever really understand the sacrifices people make for us? All the stuff they go through, the choices they make just to keep us safe or point us in the right direction? This encounter really makes you appreciate that.
And what's cool is how Album takes this huge sacrifice, like life or death stuff, and puts it next to these everyday sacrifices we usually don't even notice.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Like parents working their butts off to provide for their kids, or friends who are there to listen when things are tough. It's like those little acts of putting others first, they build these connections between people. It's what holds us all together.
Right. On to encounter number 3. Eddie meets Ruby. She's this kind woman who knew his dad. And she helps him understand his dad better, like why he was the way he was, the struggles he went through. It's a big deal for Eddie because he's been carrying around all this anger toward his father for years.
This one's all about forgiveness. Ruby teaches Eddie that forgiving someone doesn't mean you're saying what they did was okay. It's about letting go of all that anger and bitterness you're holding inside.
Yeah.
It's about trying to understand, putting yourself in their shoes and finding some peace. Have you ever been angry at someone for a long time? Like, really holding a grudge? How did that feel?
It's like carrying a weight around, isn't it? Ruby's lesson shows you how to let go of that weight. It's not just good for the person you're forgiving, but for you too.
Yeah. And the book reminds us that forgiving someone isn't like flipping a switch. It takes time. Sometimes you have to really see their story, all the pain they went through, to really open your heart.
Okay, brace yourselves for this next one. Encounter number 4. This is where Eddie meets his wife, Marguerite.
Oh.
She died years before him, and this reunion is like super emotional. Marguerite reminds Eddie that just because their bodies are gone, it doesn't mean their love story is over. It goes beyond that, living on in the memories they shared and the bond they had.
This part really gets you in the feels. It's like love never really dies, right? It stays with the
Yeah.
people who are left behind. And it helps them through the pain of losing someone. It makes you think about the people you've loved who aren't here anymore. What are those memories, those little things that keep their love alive for you?
It's personal. It tells us that the people we love, they're still with us in a way, even when they're gone. They shape who we are and the choices we make.
It's like they're part of us.
Yeah, yeah. And it makes you realize how important it is to cherish the time we have with the people we love, to make every moment count.
Absolutely. Say what you need to say. Make those memories.
Okay, Eddie's 5th and final encounter. This one takes us to a place of deep sadness, even guilt. He meets Tala, a young girl who died because of something Eddie did during the war, but he didn't even know it. He accidentally set a hut on fire, and she was hiding inside. It's this awful thing that's been haunting him without him even realizing it.
Whoa.
It's a powerful encounter because it's all about finding meaning, even when you've messed up, even when you feel guilty. Kala tells Eddie that his life wasn't pointless. All those years he spent at Ruby Pier, keeping the kids safe, that became his way of making up for what happened, like subconsciously protecting innocence.
Wow. It's like he found a way to redeem himself without even knowing it.
Exactly. It gives you hope, this idea of second chances. Even when you carry guilt and regret, your life can still have a positive impact. And sometimes it's those quiet, everyday acts of service that mean the most.
Totally. It brings the whole story full circle. It's saying that every life has a purpose, and even when bad things happen, there's always a chance to find redemption and meaning, even in the ordinary things.
So we've gone through all 5 of these powerful encounters. Each one's like a different perspective on life, loss, and the connections that stick with us. What are your first thoughts on all of this? What really stood out to you? What lessons really hit home?
Album really takes us on a ride, doesn't he? Makes you think about some pretty deep stuff. Like, if you met 5 people in heaven, who would they be? What would they teach you? It gets you thinking about the people who shaped your life, and what kind of wisdom they might have to share.
Yeah, that's a great question to ponder, isn't it? And what struck me is how different all of Eddie's encounters are. He meets people from all walks of life, different ages, different relationships. It shows you that these connections that matter, they can come from anywhere. You never know.
Exactly. And each one of these meetings, it's like another piece of the puzzle of who Eddie is. You see his strengths, his weaknesses, all the things that made him who he was. It's like a reminder that we're all these complicated beings, shaped by so many different things and people.
One of the things that really stuck with me is this idea that everything's connected. Remember what the Blue Man said
Yeah.
about how our actions have these ripple effects. It makes you realize that even the tiniest choices we make can have these crazy consequences, and we're all tangled up in this web of connections.
Yeah, like we're all part of this big, crazy tapestry of life. Our actions, the choices we make, even just being here, it all affects other people. It creates these ripples that go way beyond what we can see.
It's kind of humbling when you think about it.
Yeah.
And you see it again and again with the Captain, Ruby, and Tala. They all played a part in shaping Eddie's life, even if he didn't always know it. It's a good reminder that our lives are woven together with everyone else's. We're all sharing experiences and influencing each other.
It really makes you think about the impact we have on others, doesn't it? Both good and bad.
Mm,
And it makes you want to be a little more mindful of the choices you make.
definitely. Another thing that resonated with me was the theme of sacrifice. Like the captain risking his own life to save Eddie, and Eddie dedicating himself to keeping those kids safe at Ruby Pier. It shows you how powerful it can be when you put other people's needs before your own.
Yeah. Sacrifice often means making tough choices, facing hardships or letting go of what you want for the sake of someone else. It shows you just how strong human compassion can be.
And it's not always about these big heroic things, right? He talked about those everyday sacrifices, the ones we hardly notice. Like a parent working extra hours to support their family, or a friend who listens when you need to vent.
Hmm.
Those little acts of putting others first, they're the things that build strong communities. They're what hold us together.
And what's interesting is that the book shows how sacrifice doesn't always have to feel like a burden.
Oh, I see what you mean.
It can actually give you a sense of purpose, like you're connected to something bigger than yourself.
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking of deeper meaning, we can't forget about forgiveness, right? Ruby's lesson about letting go of anger and resentment, that's something we all need to hear. It shows how powerful forgiveness can be, both for the person who did wrong and the person who's forgiving.
It's easy to think that forgiving someone means you're okay with what they did, but really it's about setting yourself free from all that negativity. It's about choosing to move forward with compassion and understanding. Everybody messes up, and holding on to anger just keeps the pain going.
Yeah, it's tough though, isn't it? Especially when someone really hurts you. But the book makes this point that forgiving someone is actually good for you. It's like taking care of yourself. When you let go of that anger and resentment, you can finally heal and move on.
It takes courage, though, You have to be willing to let go of that need to punish them or get even. But in the end, you get this amazing peace of mind. The 5 people you meet in heaven really makes you think about how forgiveness can change your life.
And then there's the big one, the one that runs through the whole book, love. Eddie's reunion with Marguerite shows how love can go beyond anything, even death. It lives on in our hearts and in our memories. It's a beautiful and comforting idea, especially when you're dealing with grief.
It's like the book is saying death isn't the end of love, just a change in how it exists.
Yeah, I like that.
Love stays with us in the memories we keep, the things they taught us, and how we touch other people's lives because of them.
It's something that anyone who's lost someone can relate to, right? It reassures you that the love they gave you, it stays with you, and it can help you through the tough times.
It reminds us to really cherish every moment with the people we love, to tell them how we feel, and make memories that will last. Love really is the most powerful force there is, right? It can change everything.
Now, as we get ready to wrap up our deep dive, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what makes this book so impactful. What do you think people take away from the five people you meet in heaven? What makes it stick with them?
That's a good question. I think it's because the book digs into these big universal themes that everyone can relate to no matter who they are. It makes you think about what life is all about, how we're all connected, and how powerful things like love, sacrifice, and forgiveness really are.
Yeah, you're right. It's not a book that gives you all the answers, but it makes you look inside yourself and think about your own life, your relationships, and the things you've learned. It gives you hope,
Mm.
reminding you that even when things are tough, your life has meaning.
It's a message that goes beyond cultures and backgrounds. We all want to find meaning in our lives, feel connected, and have a purpose. The five people you meet in heaven says it's okay to embrace the ups and downs of life, to value the people in your life, and to find beauty and meaning even in the everyday things.
Exactly. It's a powerful message that keeps you thinking long after you finish the book. So as we move to the last part of our deep dive, I want you to hold onto that question we asked earlier. If you could ask Mitch Albom one question about the five people you meet in heaven, what would it be? We'll explore that and more when we come back. Welcome back to our deep dive into the five people you meet in heaven. We've been through Eddie's encounters, explored the big themes, and now it's time to revisit that question we left you with. If you could ask Mitch Albom one question about the book, what would it be?
You know, thinking about Eddie's whole journey and everything, what really sticks with me is the amusement park. Like, why set the story there? It's not just a random place, is it?
Yeah, it feels symbolic, like it's supposed to represent something bigger.
Right. It's like a mini version of life itself, with the rides and the excitement and those little moments of joy mixed in with the ordinary stuff.
I see what you mean, the ups and downs, the routines, it's all there.
And Eddie, he spends his whole life taking care of the park, fixing things, making sure everything runs smoothly. It makes me wonder if Album is saying that maybe our purpose in this big, crazy universe is to do those small things, those everyday acts of service that make people happy or keep them safe.
I like that, finding meaning in the ordinary things. It kind of goes back to what Tella said about every life having a purpose. Eddie might not have seen it that way, but his work at Ruby Pier, keeping those kids safe, it mattered.
Yeah, and it's like he was making up for his past without even knowing it. That terrible thing that happened with Tala during the war, his work becomes his redemption.
It's a powerful reminder that we all make mistakes, we all carry those regrets, but the five people you meet in heaven shows you that you can find redemption, that even the darkest parts of your life can have meaning. And sometimes it's those little acts of kindness, the ones that no one sees, that really matter.
One thing I really appreciate about the book is that it doesn't give you easy answers or make heaven seem like this perfect, fluffy place. It asks tough questions and makes you think about life, death, and how we're all connected in this big, messy way.
Exactly. It's not about telling you what to believe, but about making you think for yourself.
Yeah.
Taking those lessons Eddie learned and seeing how they fit into your own life. It's a story that stays with you and changes how you see things.
And going back to that question about the five people you might meet in heaven, it makes you think not just about WHO they might be, but about what you could learn from them. Like what truths about yourself, about life, about love and loss would they reveal to you?
It's a question that you keep coming back to, isn't it? Maybe it's not about the specific people, but about being open to learning from them, to keep growing and changing, even after we're gone from this world.
That's a good way to put it. I think that's a great place to wrap things up. The five people you meet in heaven really makes you want to live a better life, to appreciate the people around you, and to realize that we all have a part to play, no matter how small it seems. It reminds us that every life has meaning, every moment is precious, and even the shortest encounters can change the course of our journey.
So as we close out our deep dive, we leave you with that thought. Think about those five people you might meet in heaven. What would they teach you? And how can those lessons inspire you to live a more meaningful, connected, and purposeful life right here, right now? Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the stories that shape our lives. We'll see you next time.